Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast. This is John. With me tonight is Ryan.
Hello.
And we are here tonight, a special emergency episode. Ryan, I contacted you 15 minutes ago and said we should do a podcast because there was some breaking news a few hours ago. Kind of bummer news, but also just really intriguing and kind of crazy news. Miller and Lord, the announced directors of the Han Solo standalone movie, have been, I think, fired, right?
That's what the Variety article says.
Yeah. So the initial word at a couple hours ago, as I was driving my wife to the airport, I got a notification on my watch, and it just said Hollywood Reporter says that Miller and Lord are out. And Lucasfilm and Miller and Lord had released statements, and it was just super shocking. I was driving the car, Ryan, so I couldn't read the article, and it was a lengthy drive. So it was like, well, I guess I'll read about this when I get done with my trip here. Thankfully, you and other people are texting me. So it's one of those weird things where it's like, well, I'm a responsible driver. I'm not going to text and drive, but I keep getting these notifications on my watch as I'm driving. Look over the watch, and it was crazy, So when I got done, I pulled over into a parking lot and just started scrolling through my phone and reading all this stuff. But yeah, the initial news, just that they were out of the movie, that they were off the movie, was shocking enough. And then just a few minutes ago, we're finding out that turns out, at least according to sources from Variety, they've actually been fired from the movie. So we'll get into all of that. What was your thought when you heard when you heard this news? What were you thinking?
I'm incredibly bummed.
Yeah.
I think sharing a sentiment that my initial feeling was kind of a lot of what I've seen on Twitter and social media tonight is I the main reason I was even kind of okay with this movie and wanting it was because of that team. And now it puts it in a really weird place for me. And I mean, it's also it's uncomfortable. Because I mean, everyone involved here, from what I know about, everyone from Miller and Lord, and the Lucasfilms team, they all seem like decent people. So it's one of those things that's just really unfortunate. How about you? What was your initial reaction?
Well, I mean, to be honest, my initial reaction was whoa, this is crazy. I'm shocked. And then, I don't think I've ever seen a Miller and Lord film. I think
You've never seen the Lego movie?
I've never seen the Lego movie. No.
Oh my God.
No, I've never seen that. And I never saw 21 Jump Street.
I didn't see that.
And I know they've done other things that I haven't seen anything. And so I didn't really have a strong connection to them. In fact, I didn't see the Lego movie because it's just really, I mean, I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's really funny and everything, but it just, at least on the surface, does not seem like the kind of thing that I really respond to.
No, it's not the sort of thing that I thought I was going to respond to either. But it's it is way better than you could expect.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. Yeah. I don't doubt that it's really, really good. So maybe
it's good in ways you won't expect as well.
Okay. All right.
I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay. But I guess I wasn't where you are thinking I'm really excited these guys are making this movie because I just don't have any really personal attachment or even understanding of their work, to be honest with you. So that's not where I was, but I did feel, it's just it's just an unfortunate situation. I mean, I think obviously Lucasfilm can't be happy that they've invested in this choice for directors and that they've been working on making this movie all this time. And, it can't be good for Lucasfilm, but it's terrible for them, I would assume too, to be think of what an amazing opportunity it is to be given a Star Wars film, and like what that must mean to almost anybody who's grown up in our culture. And you know what I mean? Like, to be given that opportunity and then have it taken away, like it's sad. You know what I mean? So like, it's
Well,
not like,
there's quite a few people who can talk
well,
about that in the past 3 years.
yeah, I think if we want to talk about three, and we might come back to this towards the end of the show, but if we want to talk about three, at least potential standalone movies, two directors lost the job and one came close. It seems like, or maybe not, but there was at least some troubled waters. So yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's I just feel bad for them, I guess is the point. I feel bad for them. So I think maybe later on in the discussion too, we can come back around to, you know, you said it's the only thing that you were feeling good about, or the only reason you were like okay with the idea of a Han Solo movie. I'm not too far away from you there, but I feel like I have some things I can say that maybe will, I don't know, hopefully maybe, you know, calm that down a little bit, any anxiety you might have in relation to that. But let's talk about, like, let's get more into the actual news here.
Mhm.
I think we can.
Do we want to read this statement from Lucasfilm first and kind of dissect that a bit?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Do you have
Because
that
I thought
handy
it
or?
was really interesting. Yeah, I can read it here.
Okay.
So this was on the StarWars.com front page. Um, like this was like immediate, you know, this was immediately up there, like as the news broke. Like it was right there on the website, which you know, I do want to say, like, I applaud the team over at Lucasfilm for, you know, having some level of transparency and it not just being something that's you know, just in the industry, on the industry side. So so the statement says, it's titled "A Message from Lucasfilm Regarding the Untitled Han Solo Film." The untitled Han Solo film will move forward with a directorial change. And then comes the quote. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller are talented filmmakers who have assembled an incredible cast and crew, but it's become clear that we had different creative visions on this film, and we've decided to part ways. A new director will be announced soon, said Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm. And then next paragraph, quote, unfortunately, our vision and process weren't aligned with our partners on this project. We normally aren't fans of the phrase creative differences, but for once, this cliche is true. We are really proud of the amazing and world-class work of our cast and crew, stated Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. The untitled Han Solo film remains scheduled for a May 2018 release.
That I thought was definitely interesting. The idea that they're like doubling down or committing to that May release date. I guess it could be a situation where they're thinking like, all right, let's let people freak out about, you know, these directors being removed first, and then maybe we'll if we have to change the date, we can do that like after we've shown a trailer and people have gotten excited again. You know, it could be one of those things. But I do think the movie is probably 75% filmed at this point, you know. According to Variety and some other sources, it's, you know, a few more weeks of shooting, and then you know, some reshoots are already scheduled. But yeah, I mean, if it's mostly filmed, it's just, I guess, a matter of bringing somebody in to finish that up and then edit and do all the post production. So I guess we'll see. But anyways, we'll talk about the statements because that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think about Lucasfilm's statement specifically?
I mean, it's
Very PR. Were you just thinking like it's just PR speak and there's not much you can glean from it?
It feels a little PR-ish. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like anything. It feels like how you would do this, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't say much, right? It says, "Hey, we like them, but we fired them, and we'll tell you who's new pretty soon." That's pretty much all it says, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's, I I think it's nice that their statement ended with like really kind of, you know, a pat on the back for the cast and crew. But I guess this is one of those things too, where like their statement was probably read by 500 people before it was released, and it's just maybe a little bit of saving face and a little bit of like, I don't know, just trying to make people feel okay about what's going on. But I guess your point stands though, that like it's not like they let this like be rumored in the trade papers for, you know, weeks on end, and you know that they let like the news get out there and people speculate a ton and whatever. Like it's just very transparent, or not very transparent, because they, like we said, it's PR speak, but it's at least being acknowledged and, you know, not swept under the rug or hidden or anything like that.
Yeah. I think I mean, yeah, there is some PR speak in here, in, you know, both of the statements, but I think there's also like a lot of, you can glean a lot from what is said here as well,
Okay.
especially from the Lord and Miller statements. Um, the Unfortunately, our vision and process weren't aligned with our partners on this project. And that's interesting to me. And, you know, I guess in the Lucasfilm statement, there was, you know, different creative visions. And it's interesting that this is happening, like they are discovering this about their relationship 3 weeks before the film is done shooting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, you know, kind of makes me feel that, and you know, there's a bigger picture story to this too, but like the feeling I get is maybe there was a bit of too much too fast, and maybe not establishing strong visions and strong relationships before getting started on some of these ventures.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. Part of me wonders too, though, if this was like business as usual, if it was just, you know, if it was 21 Jump Street, or it was like, you know, even the Lego movie or something, if business as usual or a standard practice would be for the producers and the studio and whoever to be like, we're not super happy with this, or there's a lot of butting heads, but you know what, the movie's getting made, the product will be launchable, or whatever you want to say, and like we'll put it out there. Part of me, and this is maybe, you know, kind of where we're going to go later on in the discussion, but part of me is like, you know, the idea that I guess it's, you know, like we have an absolute like standard and an absolute like, you know, you were mentioning maybe the vision wasn't there. I feel like the vision is there, but the problem is that where, you know, Miller and Lord want to be like ultimate, you know, have creative control. You have Lucasfilm and specifically Kathleen Kennedy, but Star Wars is an entity that is not, you know, we'll hire you and we're going to let you, you know, do your thing to a certain point. But if it's not what we want, then you're not doing it, you know. I can see where that's sort of autocratic and maybe scary, but I can also see where it's like extreme quality control potentially, you know, if what they're going for is what it really needs to be. I don't know. But yeah, to me, I read that first line of their statement and it's like, we know how to do that, or we know what this should be, and they're not letting us make it that. Like, we have a vision and they won't let us execute our vision.
But like, why weren't these expectations set before they started filming? Because like, I can see it that way, but this also seems to be a reoccurring problem with Lucasfilm, with the way they're kind of going through talent, even, you know, even going back to episode 7, you know, and how that was kind of scrapped at a point and kind of restarted with you know, Abrams at the helm, and pulling in like Larry Kasdan at sort of not quite the last minute, but was not part of the original vision.
Yeah. Sort of. Although I guess I need to go back and look at that a little more closely before I say this. But I think what happened is, and this is interesting because it's really related to Han Solo. I think Kasdan was brought in to write Han Solo, which he was working on, but also brought in to be sort of like a founding father of Star Wars, to sort of be, kind of having an eye on everything,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think he was, involved in The Force Awakens from a development point of view, not as a writer, but just like, yeah, I'm one of the people at Lucasfilm that's, taking a look at things and making sure it's moving in the direction it should be. And I was so nervous, I don't think we were doing Blockade Runner at the time, but if we were, I probably would have been like, let's do an emergency episode of the show to talk about Michael Arndt, like being,
Mm-hmm.
removed, because that was nerve wracking. But it
Yeah.
turns out, like, Michael Arndt was at the premiere, and they were doing, like, I listened to an interview they did at like I think it was the Writers Guild or something, Directors Guild. I don't know. But from what I've heard, that boiled down to he just wanted more time and they didn't have enough. He wasn't able to write fast enough. So he turned in a draft, and I don't think that they were unhappy with it, but I think that they said, like, he said, I need 18 more months to write this. And they were like, we can't do that. That's like way too much time. So I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
was like a butting of heads or like a creative. I think they were, with George Lucas, maybe there was some of that on The Force Awakens. But I think with Michael Arndt, it felt like maybe that's what happened behind closed doors. But it turned out in the end that I think he just couldn't work fast enough. And so Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams, because they wrote it in like 3 months or something from his draft. I mean, he worked on it for like a year, and then they wrote the rest of it quickly, if I'm remembering correctly. But there's the whole thing with Josh Trank, and there's the whole thing with Gareth Edwards that kind of, it worked out in the end, but it was definitely, rough waters, like we said. So you're totally right. There's definitely a history of this kind of stuff with them for sure. But then again, like, they're 2 for 2, like, in a big way in my mind right now. They have not made, they've made some amazing Star Wars movies. And from hearing Kathleen Kennedy talk about Rian Johnson, it sounds like that was an incredibly smooth relationship there too. So I don't know. There seems to be like a standalone movie curse, to be honest, is what it feels like at this
Maybe,
point.
but this seemed like a smooth relationship until today.
Yeah,
Because
it's true.
like I follow both Lord and Miller on Twitter, and they were like always tweeting like jokes, and they had like a really good attitude about it, and which is not the type of stuff you tweet when maybe your workplace environment isn't great or whatever. I don't know, or maybe.
Well, is there more you want to say about this statement from them, or
No.
or should we jump into like the real kind of I don't know if meaty's the right word here, but like it was like the initial news was crazy shocking, and then 2 hours later, 3 hours later, the story comes out on Variety.com from Brent Lang. Star Wars Han Solo spinoff, Lord and Miller fired after clashing with Kathleen Kennedy. And this is billed as an exclusive. So this is where it's like, I feel like we really start to see what potentially is happening here. And we'll, quote this at times, but the sort of thesis, or like kind of main claim of this article, is that they weren't getting along, and they weren't getting along, and specifically like Lord and Miller and Kathleen Kennedy were clashing, and that they wanted to do things the way that they wanted to do them. Kathleen Kennedy wanted control, and that she just basically, they couldn't get along, that it was contentious all along, things like that. So we'll talk about it more in detail, but that was shocking to hear that it came down to like they wanted to do things one way, and Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm had a completely different vision. And I think that speaks to kind of what you're talking about, right? Like how did this become a problem this late into the production? how did this just become known at this point, right? Like this should have been in pre-production. They could have, changed direction and gone with somebody else, if this has been kind of known all this time. But
yeah, and I mean it's kind of like it's sort of having a cake and eating it too. Like, do Lucasfilm really want to like bring in like, I don't know if auteurs are the right term, but very directors with certain styles and visions. Like, is that what they want to do? Do they want to bring these people in to have their own like unique stamp on the Star Wars universe, and have movies of different tone and stuff? Or do they want to have like a Star Wars style guide? And do they want to have directors that can execute like a singular vision with almost like workmanlike? And I mean it's like, because it seems like they keep bringing in and I mean we'll see how how everything kind of shakes out with Rian Johnson and stuff. But like these are and like bringing in directors who are maybe like young directors who are not as known, who have either like like indie hits or like B-level hits, or just different genres than space opera. Like, is that what they want to do, or do they want like just a uniform Star Wars style with people who are like really trained in the the culture and the craftsmanship of Lucasfilm, and what like that vision is?
Well, I mean, I would imagine what they want is the best of both worlds of what you just described there, like, and I think it seems like that's what they're going to get with Rian Johnson, because we'll see what happens with episode 8, but I have a feeling that, Rian Johnson fits pretty well into both of those descriptions, on your part. Like, he is somebody with a unique vision, but he's also able to work within, I think he's able to, I'm guessing, because I haven't seen The Last Jedi, obviously, but I think he's able to push the boundaries of, what a Star Wars story is, what a Star Wars film is, etc., and able to challenge that a little bit and to be very creative and different, but also able to sort of understand what his job is and make a Star Wars movie. And I think, to me, that sounds ideal. I want people with creative vision. I want people who have unique ideas to come in and do something that is not exactly what's been done before, but I don't want them to go too far away from it, at least in saga films. But that's, I mean, the whole idea of the Star Wars anthology or the Star Wars, story films is, it seems like such a fine line, and like the whole process would be walking such a tightrope, because part of the whole point of it is to explore different genres and different types of Star Wars movies, but they still have to be Star Wars. I mean, they still have to be Star Wars movies, right? So then how do you do that? I don't know. I mean, I think you can look at The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and sort of say, well, with Empire, you have a movie that totally feels like Star Wars, but also you can see Irvin Kershner's sensibilities, and you can see how it's not just, taking the blueprint of A New Hope and repeating that. And then I think with Return of the Jedi, you can kind of see how the director of that film was somebody that was able to do a job and do what the director wanted him to do, and sort of take orders. Both of them feel like Star Wars, but I don't feel like Irvin Kershner's creative vision was lost because he was able to make a Star Wars film and not have it be too wildly different from what had come before. I guess my point is, like, I'm hoping that what Rian Johnson will be doing is something along the lines of what Irvin Kershner did. It's like, expand the boundaries, test the limits of what you can do in a Star Wars movie, but make something that is still essentially Star Wars, but has the Irvin Kershner spin on that Star Wars formula. I think Rian Johnson's going to do that with The Last Jedi. I don't know what they hired Lord and Miller to do. I don't know if that's what they hired them to do, if they hired them to make a Lord and Miller movie and, thought that would be Star Warsy enough and then it isn't. I don't know if it's possible that the Han Solo movie that Lord and Miller were making was very Star Wars, but that they just couldn't get along with Kathleen Kennedy, or she couldn't get along with them, or you know what I mean? Because that's kind of a false premise too, like that I'm putting out here unintentionally, is like, well, if it wasn't going well between Lord and Miller and Kathleen Kennedy, that must mean the movie they were making wasn't Star Wars enough. Well, that's not necessarily true, right? Maybe it was. Yeah. Maybe it was super Star Warsy. Maybe it was great, but they had different opinions in terms of, who knows, all kinds of things, budgets, or how to work with actors, or lighting techniques, or you know what I mean, a million things. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, but there's some crazy claims in this article, though. One source in this Variety article says that the directors weren't given the leeway to do what they had to do, that Kathleen Kennedy didn't approve of their shooting style and their process of interacting with actors and the crew. Like, she's on set every day and she doesn't like the way they run their set and the way that they go about the business of making a film. It might not even necessarily be like if they're watching dailies or whatever you call it now in 2017, but like it might not even be that what was up on screen was not satisfying. It might just be like personality stuff, according to this article. I don't know. But then beyond that, the thing that really stuck out to me, and the thing where, and maybe this isn't fair of me, but the thing where I'm kind of feeling like maybe this was the best decision, is when I'm hearing like that Lawrence Kasdan was clashing with them, that Lawrence Kasdan was not agreeing with their choices and was not able to work with them well, because it's Lawrence Kasdan's script, and he's the guy that wrote the best Han Solo lines in Empire and Jedi, I think. And it's just, I mean, there's few people that it's almost like they got hired to work on a Star Wars movie and couldn't get along with George Lucas. You know what I mean? Like, it's not there, but it's close to that to me if it's Lawrence Kasdan, Yeah. Especially because he wrote the script. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the way it's written about here is that they were asked, or well, they were fired. They didn't choose to leave. They were fired. So I don't know, but in the idea that a new director is going to be announced shortly too. You have any thoughts on that? Like how that's going to potential. The only thing I can think of right now, and we texted about this earlier, but the only thing I can think of right now is Lawrence Kasdan.
Does he have director experience?
Oh yeah. Okay. A ton. Yeah. He directed The Big Chill, wrote and directed The Big Chill. Okay. Little known movie that I love, which is Mumford. I don't know if you've ever seen Mumford.
No.
He's done a ton of stuff. Yeah, he's been directing for years and years and years. So yeah, he can do that for sure. Especially I think at this point. But I don't know. I mean, it's about shaping the movie in the editorial process and all that. So there's a lot to it. I don't know if he'd want to do that. But if the announcement comes out, on Monday of next week, like, okay, well, Lawrence Kasdan is taking over directing duties and, he'll be the one who sees this film through. I think I would be pretty comfortable with that. Like I said, because he wrote the script for Force Awakens. I mean, he worked on Empire and Jedi. Like, who better, unless they're bringing George Lucas in to finish the movie, I'll tell you what, I just finished they're not, I'm sure they're not bringing George Lucas in. I just finished a biography. What if they're bringing George Lucas in? Oh my God. The thought never crossed my mind.
No, because it's ridiculous and it is definitely not happening.
It is ridiculous. It's definitely not happening. But Trust me when I tell you, we will be reassembling for another emergency episode next week if George Lucas is. No, he won't be. But I just finished reading George Lucas' A Life, which I may have mentioned on the show. It was great. Highly recommend that. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over was the fact that George would always say like, "Oh man, making a movie, I hate that. Like, I hate the whole process of being on set and doing the movie. Like for me, you make a movie in the editing room. That's where you make a movie, when you edit it. Like that's kind of what's left on this movie." So
oh my god.
no, it won't be George Lucas,
No.
but I would be scared and so happy at the same time if it was him.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking Lawrence Kasdan, but we'll see.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not like unsalvageable. Like they have such a good cast and everything on the movie, and I'm super excited to see like what has already been filmed and everything. But it's yeah, I mean there's not really too many people who are teams or whatever that I mean, like I think the Lord and Miller team was just a really interesting and cool fit for this, at least on paper, because they're younger, they have like their own like quirky yet heartfelt visions on how they like approach films, and they have a history of tackling old properties and established franchises, I guess, and putting a unique twist on them. And I think it would have been cool to see their I don't know, their vision of what a Han Solo movie would be. And we're still probably going to get like 75% of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it's really curious. They say it's like, oh, it's the old cliche, but it really is true. It came down to creative differences. If that's the case, I wonder how much of the movie is going to be reshot, how much is going to be changed. Is it like I was thinking earlier, where the actual footage and the scenes and the product so far is fine, but it's like personality conflicts and things like that. What does that mean, creative conflicts? Like obviously they have a shooting script. Miller and Lord must have been okay with that shooting script, right? There must have been a certain brand of humor in that script. I don't know, like I mean, they're known for making obviously funny movies, right? Like clearly Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan must have wanted that if they hired Lord and Miller. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it can't be something as simple as that, as they were being too lighthearted and too silly, right? Because why would you hire them if you're not looking for that kind of thing? So I really wonder, I'm really curious, like what are these creative differences? What specifically is it that they couldn't get along about? And, if it's not something really, like what would you know them better than I do, but like the words that you've used to describe them so far, the words that come to mind when describing Lord Miller are things like quirky and, like a, funny. I mean, those are the things you think of, right? When you think of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, again, like there's in the Lego movie, there's a level of heart that I was not expecting, and it's not necessarily in like an emotionally manipulative way. It's like a surprising way that made it like really effective.
Okay. So quirky, funny, but also a lot of heart is what you would think is how you describe them, kind of. Yeah. Okay. And so hopefully that's what they wanted when they hired them, or what, it's probably what they thought of when they thought of those directors too. So I don't know. I mean, I just really wonder like what it is that that caused this split, because I would assume it's not those things, and if it's not those things, then maybe those things will still be intact, you know, in the final film, even without them attached. That's, you know, really kind of sad too, though, to think that they brought this movie, you know, halfway to the finish line, injected it with those kinds of things, and then aren't going to get the credit and aren't going to get the chance to finish it up. I mean, that's a bummer, right there. So I don't know.
Yeah, and especially considering like so much of a movie kind of comes together in those final moments, and that's where some of those like last minute decisions are, you know, some of the things that define like classic movies. Like, you know, I mean, even going back to A New Hope, like there's like the old I don't even think it's like a legend or a folk tale or whatever, but you know, the first the first cut of A New Hope definitely, you know, didn't really resonate with people when, you know, George showed it to people and like his friends and coworkers in private, and then it was some last minute decisions like the use of John Williams music, some editing choices, and that's what really, you know, made that movie come together and it was like right at the end. You know, that's when he like reached his vision.
Yeah,
So
with the help of you know, quite a few other people too. I've been reading a lot about that also recently, and yeah, definitely, you know, his wife at the time, Marcia Lucas, and the other editors he was working with, and you know, John Williams, like you said, it was a lot of things that had to come together the right way, and they did. And obviously George deserves the primary credit for the brilliance that is A New Hope, but there's a lot of people that had to be involved too. So I don't know.
But if he would have just handed what he had done off to those people, would it still have come together in that way?
No, probably not. You're right. And that's a good point. That is a good point. The sort of devil's advocate response to that, though, is Lawrence Kasdan, Kathleen Kennedy, the story group at Lucasfilm. They've been not responsible for, but highly involved in 2 really great Star Wars movies in the last 2 years. And so you're talking about creating like with George creating Star Wars initially, that's, you know, making something brand new versus J.J. Abrams being able to make a great Star Wars movie with George Lucas completely uninvolved. You know what I mean? And I know your point wasn't about George Lucas specifically so much as if you take the creative team away in the end, like, you know, he made incredibly important decisions in the final months of, you know, post-production on A New Hope. So I get your point, and it's totally valid, but, you know, devil's advocate or whatever is Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan maybe are the people that are as important to making those decisions in the end too. I don't know. But this is a really like interesting time for this news to break as well, because the Star Wars kind of fan, whatever follower world has been a little bit up in arms this week about Colin Trevorrow, however his name is pronounced. I don't know if you've been following that at all, Ryan, or not, but he has a new movie out this week or last week called The Book of Henry. It has like a 23% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, and there are reviews that are calling it just absolute garbage. So there's been a lot of worried Star Wars fans this week saying like, this guy's going to make episode 9. Like he just put out a horrible movie. Yeah.
The sequel trilogy.
Right. And I saw quite a few people saying also like, I think he's going to get fired. I think they're going to pull the plug on Trevorrow and go with somebody else. And I thought that was really crazy. Like, I was on social media and talking to people this week saying like, there's no way they're going to pull Colin Trevorrow, and I still don't think they will. I still don't think there's much, reason to believe that he's going to be removed or fired or whatever. But I was like, come on, he's almost done with the script. They're getting ready to shoot soon. They would never fire him this far into the process. And then they fired Lord Miller 3 weeks before, principal shooting was going to end on this Han Solo movie. So I guess you never know. But it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things where there's a lot riding on every single one of these Star Wars movies. And it seems like Lucasfilm is committed to getting them right, at least in their minds, what right is. And, because this is the sort of thing that's embarrassing, I think, for all parties involved, right? And definitely the kind of thing you want to avoid as a filmmaker and as a production company, I think, as much as possible. So I'm sure they're not making these decisions lightly. Did you see Jurassic World? I'm sure you saw Jurassic World, right? I don't remember what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I was not a fan.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, seeing the Book of Henry stuff didn't surprise me, because that's about the level of movie that I thought Jurassic World was.
Whoa.
And I'm trying to think back to it, when stuff fell through with Josh Trank. Was that following the poor reception of his Fantastic Four movie?
I believe it was a month or two before, or maybe even more, but I think it was before the Fantastic Four came out. But the Fantastic Four, if I remember correctly, was very similar, at least in my mind. It was being talked about in a way that was similar to how Rogue One was being talked about for a while there, where people were just whispering or talking about what a disaster it was, how the studio was taking the movie away from the director, etc. And so I think that talk was definitely, had been around for a while, or had been pretty intense at the point that they fired Josh Trank. But then with Josh Trank, and I don't know much about this or want to, validate this or anything, but there's definitely some talk of behavior and potential inability to handle the stress of running a movie like Fantastic Four day to day. That I think, to me, that seems the more likely cause of what happened with him being removed from the movie. I think it was probably less about the Fantastic Four as a product and more about him as, I don't know if employee is the right word, but him as a leader, or him as a trustworthy person to embark on making a movie with. I think that's what it was about, more so than he made a movie that wasn't good. I think it was we can't trust this person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, he was a super young director. I believe he's younger than us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or around our age.
Around our age, yeah.
I can not even imagine being in that situation. But there was a lot of factors with that, because there was also a lot of stuff on the Marvel side and the Marvel Fox split, and some there's a lot of weird animosity between those companies. Marvel hasn't published a Fantastic Four comic in 2 years.
Really?
Or maybe a year, 2 years. Yeah, they refuse to, in the comics, the Fantastic Four are not acknowledged. Wow. As of right now.
And it's because of what's going on with the films?
It's these comic characters now are kind of just becoming bargaining chips between the companies, and it's kind of spiraling out of control. But yeah, there's some like really nasty stuff and nasty rumors, that those are like directives coming down to like the creative side on the comic company, on the comic side, from the top of the company.
Yeah.
And I think all of that was occurring during the production of that film as well. So, I mean, there could have been like huge outside influences and stuff as well. So,
Yeah. But to bring it back to Trevorrow, I really need to figure out how to say his name, or just pick one, I guess. But to me, I think Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy probably look at him, and say he made Jurassic World, which is I think is it still the highest grossing film in US box office history? Or maybe it's worldwide, and Force Awakens is
really well.
I mean, Force Awakens and Jurassic World are right like there, neck and neck. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest blockbuster successes of all time. So I think they're probably comfortable with him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. If Book of Henry is really, really terrible, as a lot of people are saying it is, I would think even they're looking at that and saying that movie is nothing like a Star Wars or Jurassic Park movie. Like, I guess he can't do that kind of movie, but he did Jurassic World and we're happy with it. I get that you're not, and a lot of people aren't. I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was super inspired or anything, but I thought I remember my reaction to watching it was like, he was able to make a movie that felt like Jurassic Park, maybe there's writing issues with it. Maybe there's execution issues with it in some ways, but like for the most part, was he able to do a copycat Steven Spielberg movie and do it pretty like proficient, a pretty good job of that? Yeah, I thought so, and so I was like, here's a guy who can make a giant blockbuster and he can make it feel the way he wants to make it feel for the audience. That was my kind of feeling on the movie. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was anything particularly incredible, but I thought the guy can step into these shoes and do something on this like massive scale and pull it off. So obviously I'm expecting and hoping for much, much more from him than that in doing Star Wars Episode 9. Like, I would not be satisfied with that for Episode 9, but I'm going to keep the faith in him, and I don't think that this is like dominoes and Trevorrow's next to go. I think that it seems to me that the standalone movies have a much rockier kind of path here, than the saga movies. And I don't know why that is. I guess I feel like it's probably a really, like I said earlier, it's like a really fine line of what they want these standalone movies to be. How sort of adventurous do they want them to be with pushing boundaries and trying new things, and how much do they want them to feel like they fit into a traditional Star Wars movie? You used the word style guide earlier. I don't think there probably is a style guide for these standalones, but it's probably not far from that, right? Like, there's a certain vibe that they're going for. Going back to Han Solo, before we wrap up here, like, I know that Kathleen Kennedy, and it's quoted here in this Variety article, they quote her from last year when she said that she wanted the Han Solo film to have a heist or a Western type feel. And she mentions Frederick Remington and these, classic Western paintings and going for that kind of vibe. I think they are trying to do different things with these standalone movies. I think they do want them to feel different than a traditional Star Wars movie, and that's maybe where part of the problem comes from. Like, you go to a young director or directors and say, look, we want to make a Star Wars movie, but we also want it to have like this Western vibe, and we want it to be funny. So do that. Make it those things, but also Star Wars, that seems like a really difficult and complicated cocktail to put together. And it might be a thing where Lucasfilm thinks, or has been thinking, like, well, we could do this, we can make a Star Wars movie that's also a comedy and also a Western, but it'll still feel totally Star Wars. We can definitely do that. And, these Miller and Lord guys are really good. Let's get them to do it. They'll be able to do it. And then, if both sides have a different idea of how to make that happen, I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got to wonder if, this yearly film schedule is maybe spreading some people a bit too thin. Some of the people making the executive decisions, that maybe there's just not enough people in power who are really having time to like kind of chew on all this, when you're doing these story films and the anthology films, or the saga films simultaneously.
Yeah, that seems like a distinct possibility. That absolutely does seem like a possibility. Part of me was thinking like, well, right now, Rian Johnson's editing The Last Jedi, and they seem really comfortable with what he's doing. So, the powers that be at Lucasfilm ought to be able to devote more attention to Han Solo right now, because, they're pretty happy with the direction of Last Jedi. But you have to figure the decision was made to hire these guys during, I think, post-production on The Force Awakens, which was then obviously a really busy time because that was the first one. And then, as soon as that got done, like Rogue One was in trouble. And yeah, there's been a lot going on for Lucasfilm, right, in the last few years. So I think that's probably totally true. And it'll be interesting to see what happens then after Episode 9, if they sort of go to a Star Wars movie every 2 years kind of thing instead of every year. If they're holding off on saga films for a while, we'll see. We'll see what they do.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, Ryan, unless you want to, have another direction you want to take this.
No, I'm just I'm just wondering if, like, also I feel like I've been maybe like a little harsh on the company.
That's good though, because I feel like I've been a little harsh, not harsh on Miller and Lord, but very like pro Lucasfilm here. You know what I mean? Like they're making the right call. So, we've got some different perspective. It's good.
Yeah, but this is probably like growing pains and a learning process for them. I think their goal is probably not to have a Star Wars movie every 2 years. It's probably to have 2 Star Wars movies a year, like Marvel style, which I don't know how sustainable that is going to be in the future. But
I wonder if they would look at the Marvel movies though and view those as an acceptable level of quality for like the Star Wars like franchise. And when we say they, that's a whole different, like, do I mean Bob Iger when I say they? Do I mean Kathleen Kennedy when I say they? Do I mean, you know what I mean? Like JJ and Lawrence Kasdan, people like that. Like, who do I mean when I say they? You know what I mean? Because the answer is probably going to be different depending on who we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and there was some of this over on the Marvel side too. There were these similar kind of, I guess, growing pains. Whole lot of creative differences have happened. With the Paul Rudd Ant-Man film. Edgar Wright was originally on that film, pretty deep into some level of production, and then he was replaced for creative differences. And then, after Joss Whedon finished the second Avengers movie, it was kind of made clear on both sides that they will not be working together again in the foreseeable future.
Although, has that softened a little bit in the last like couple months or last year or whatever? I thought I've heard like some talk that he might be coming back or involved in?
Uh,
No.
he is making Batgirl for DC,
Okay.
and he is finishing. He has um, come in to finish the Justice League movie.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. So he's sleeping with the enemy right now. Is where they're at. I see.
He's made new friends.
Okay. All right. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so I
Um,
wonder if there is kind of like a bigger picture. Things are maybe not all entirely rosy all the time, but I mean, it's this is high stakes stuff. Like this is like hundreds of millions of dollars, and tons of people's jobs, and it's an international level thing. And I mean, for the most part, like Disney's been getting it right with Marvel and Star Wars films. So, but
and I think with Star Wars, 100%. Like Force Awakens was great, Rogue One was great, and we probably did have a show very similar to this one sometime last summer about Rogue One and like how's it going to turn out. And I think it
mhm.
turned out really well, but
Yeah.
there was plenty of industry insider talk and rumors and everything about that movie, being in trouble. And I'm sure it probably was, and I'm sure a lot of that stuff was true and whatnot. But then, you look at that one and you say, well, Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm and Bob Iger and everybody, they stood by Gareth Edwards, and they seem to have been willing to, take that risk and maintain his creative vision. And I know that Tony Gilroy came in and there was reshoots and all that stuff, but like I didn't get the impression. Some of the stories at the time suggested that that was kind of like going above and over Gareth Edwards' head and that kind of thing. But I'm not getting that impression anymore. Or I guess like at the end of the road, it didn't feel that way. It felt like, and I know that he'd worked with Tony Gilroy on Godzilla too, I think. So it just felt like something like that Gareth Edwards was probably fine with and comfortable with, um, and not something that the studio was like, well, we don't trust you, we're bringing this other guy in. So anyways, I guess my point there is just that, like, with the troubled production on Rogue One, they were able to see that through and maintain the creative team, and they didn't fire anybody, and they didn't, um, so I don't know. I feel like this seems contentious. This seems very, it seems to be personality conflicts and people not liking each other, and more than just like this movie's not going necessarily the way we hoped and we have to reshoot, or we're having trouble finding the ending to this movie. It's more like we don't
Mhm.
like each other is what it seems like.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the most behind the scenes that we've gotten on any of these movies.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is the realest, info we've we've gotten. So, I mean, it's not to say that this stuff didn't happen in production of other films. Under within the Lucasfilm umbrella or under the whole Disney umbrella. Um, but I mean, maybe people are humans, and um, you know, they handle things differently.
Yeah. Well, so to wrap up here, Ryan, I want to know where, like, how do you feel about this Han Solo movie at this stage in the game? Like, we're what 10 months out from the movie coming out. We just found out today the
Mhm.
directors have been fired. We haven't really seen any footage or any photos. I mean, we've seen leaked set photos, but there hasn't been much official from the set or anything like that. So, how do you feel about the movie at this point?
Um, I mean, the show must go on. Like you don't scrap it. Like, um, but I think I'm hoping it's a learning experience for for everyone. And um, I think, you know, at the end of the day, probably we're not going to get the film that was originally intended. And you know, it's the same kind of way I went into Ant-Man, which was especially hard because like Edgar Wright was one of my favorite, you know, directors ever. So that was hard to go into that movie like knowing what had been like taken away from one of my favorite directors, and I still ended up really enjoying it. It's like maybe my favorite Marvel movie in a lot of ways. So I mean, I
And
think like that's how I'm kind of rolling into this. It's, you know, there's always going to be a what could have been, but I mean, hopefully we still get something cool.
yeah, and I feel like the movie Ant-Man is not, it's not an Edgar Wright movie for sure, but like that sensibility is definitely kind of still part of the movie, you know.
Hmm.
Um it's not that far from something Edgar Wright might make. And by the way, I'm really excited for Baby Driver,
Oh my God,
coming
yes.
soon.
It looks
Might be
so
out where
good.
you live, I don't know, but yeah,
Not quite, not quite.
that looks really good. I'm very excited for that. And actually, I think it was this week or last week. For some reason, the rumor mill was talking about Edgar Wright and Star Wars. Then he might get a Star Wars movie. And
I think he shot that down, or
oh,
that
did he?
was shut down by him or his publicist pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And I love him too, but it just doesn't seem like. I don't think they'd be willing to push Star Wars that far from what it is traditionally. You know, um, I don't know, but maybe, you know, Miller and Lord, maybe that was um, a similar thing where it's like a little farther away from Star Wars than they're probably comfortable with. I don't know, but yeah, just Edgar Wright just seems like somebody who's really um, very individual, you know, like a very creative, very unique personality, and has a very unique sensibility. And it doesn't seem like a good person to hire to make something you want him to make. Like you hire him to go off and do what he wants to do, you know, and do something really very him.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think if, you know, I think there could be a place for stuff like this. If, you know, maybe once we do get to that twice a year Star Wars point, um, where we can have, you know, very different feeling Star Wars movies. You know, you look at Star Wars on like on like you know, in the heyday, not now, really, but in the heyday, like you would get totally different Star Wars like video games coming out every year. You'd have like Episode One Pod Racer. You'd have, you know, and these are all like years removed from each other, but like Knights of the Old Republic, and you'd have Lego Star Wars, and you'd have Yoda stories, and you know, there's varying degrees of quality there, but you know, it's still allowed for, you know, unique takes on the series. So I mean, maybe we'll get to that point, but
yeah, possible. I think personally, I'm a little too precious about Star Wars to want to see that happen, but
mhm,
um, I'm not afraid to sort of quote myself from 2012 when I was, you know, running around telling everybody who'd listen that I don't think there should be a sequel trilogy and I don't want more
mhm,
Star Wars movies. And I was really wrong about that. And, you know, so I've kind of learned in the last few years, like, as much as I might not think something's a good idea, I should try to keep an open mind about it, I guess, and see what happens.
mhm.
And I think that's, you know, sort of where I am with the Han Solo movie, to kind of answer my own question here,
Yeah,
that I posed to you, is like, I feel about the same about it as I did before this news. I mean, this is definitely a little nerve wracking to know that there's this kind of trouble with the production of the movie. And, you know, you worry about, you know, I don't want it to be a movie where it feels like it's, you can see the seams, like where they taped it together from one person's vision to another or something like
mhm,
that, you know. That makes me nervous. So I don't want to see that happen. But I don't know. I guess my kind of attitude towards this is, has always been, I don't think we need to know more about Han Solo. I would prefer that we don't. I don't want this movie. But George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan, who have a lot more ownership or deserve more ownership of that character of Han Solo than I do, they did decide that we should get this. Both George and Lawrence Kasdan. So I had to put my faith into that and say, okay, maybe these guys know something I don't, which is, almost certainly true. And then I think too, like, well, they hired Lord and Miller. I think it's going to be a fun and funny movie. And I don't think the reason they're firing them, at least I hope, is not because they made a fun and funny movie and Lucasfilm was hoping for something else. I think it's something more, more specific than that, and something I'm hoping the reason they couldn't get along and the reason that partnership has ended is because of something that won't necessarily be a huge influence on the film itself. Like, I still think there's a chance. I mean, they filmed most of the movie, so I still think there's a good chance that whatever they were doing has been working and has been going well in terms of what you're going to see on the screen, but that the relationship wasn't working, and at a certain point the boss said, look, I don't want you to work for me anymore. I'm hoping that's what it is.
I mean, but imagine like going through all this and just being like, I cannot spend another 10 months with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
I mean, when they're so close to the finish line.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Variety article does suggest that Lord and Miller felt like they have the chops and they have the experience and they have the resume that they should have been allowed to do what they want to do. And I could see somebody like Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan sort of being like, "Oh, you made the Lego movie and you rebooted 21 Jump Street. That's cool, but I worked on everything from E.T. to Indiana Jones and Schindler's List, and you work for me. You know what I mean?
I mean, I hope it wasn't that sort of pissing contest, but again, it comes down to like, you'd hope that like the expectations would be clear up front, because this is not normal.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't work in the film industry or really know anything about it, I guess. But it's just one of those. It's just one of those situations where it's like you look at somebody who is like an auteur, someone who writes and directs all of their films, and you figure like, can you hear my cat vomiting in the background there?
No.
Oh, okay, because you got a look on your face like you could hear it. Anyway.
No.
Okay, well, that was
I just sensed it.
That was an unnecessary awkward interjection on my part. No, but there's some films that like a Wes Anderson movie, for instance. He's my favorite current auteur. I don't know how you feel about him, but like Wes Anderson, you go to a Wes Anderson movie, you figure like he's making a movie, he goes and finds somebody to pay for it so he can make it, right? But it's his thing.
Yeah.
Star Wars does not belong to Lord Miller or anybody. Like, you are lucky, I feel like, if somebody hires you and says you get to make a Star Wars movie. And I just feel like that's a different thing from, I created this entirely in my head. I wrote the script. You found the funding. I'm making this movie because it's my baby. Obviously anybody who's making a Star Wars movie, I'm sure they look at it and think that's my baby, but at the same time, like, you got hired by your boss to make this, you know what I mean? And you work for them because, that's, I think, ultimately what it probably comes down to at the end of the day on something like this. Obviously, when you're talking about a creative field like filmmaking, you need the person that gets hired to have a vision, to be able to make creative decisions. And I think probably the most effective, way of working is to have, people feel empowered and feel like they can make decisions and all those things. But I don't know, there's part of me that just thinks too, like, it's Star Wars, like if you got hired to make Star Wars, you probably have to understand that you don't have the same level of control over that as you do over anything else you've ever done, because it's Star Wars. Maybe that's right, maybe it's wrong, but I just feel like that's a reality that is just seems really obvious, you know.
Yeah.
But
But
and
I'm sure they had the same expectations when they went in to do Lego. Like,
yeah, but Lego and Star Wars is not. I don't know. I bet Lego was like, hey, we want to sell more toys, and like Lego is a cool thing, but how do you turn that into a movie? You know? And they were like, we could do that for you. I bet that's kind of how that went down. Whereas Star Wars
maybe,
is, you know, not quite that, but I don't
maybe.
know. What is there? There's the Emoji Movie. Somebody was like, we own Emoji, or we own the rights to Emoji, and you figure out how to make a movie out of that. I'm assuming. I don't know.
Maybe
And I
that's
bet
the
it's every bit
approach.
as good as the Lego movie, too.
Hmm.
No,
I
I'm
think
just kidding.
I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the Emoji Movie will surprise us, and it will encompass all of the feels
No,
of emoji.
the trailer was just watching the trailer was a nightmare.
Oh, I didn't even know there was a trailer.
Yeah, I took my kids to Captain Underpants, which was great.
Okay.
And yeah, the trailer was a total nightmare to sit through. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't know. I feel like if we continue this episode anymore, it's going to be a total nightmare to sit through too. So, I think probably time to wrap it
Yeah.
up here. But I'm glad we got together to kind of talk about like how we're feeling right now about a movie that already makes a lot of people nervous, having some really shocking and concerning developments. So,
Yeah, I feel like this is a conversation that's just gonna happen once a year.
with every
For the
standalone or
next
with
few
every,
years.
yeah,
And maybe I don't know, maybe I feel like it's kind of escalating. Because
right,
this
right.
is
With,
definitely the most oh god
yeah,
of all of these stories.
with Rogue One, it was like, oh, they're going to have to reshoot more than we thought they would. And with this movie, it's like, oh, they fired the director. And I don't know where the next one could go, but it could get,
Yeah,
yeah, continue that trajectory.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's possible we might have a conversation like this about episode 9 as that's being filmed too,
Yeah.
based on the Book of Henry news. But I guess we'll see.
I'll see you this time next year.
Yeah, let's just set the calendar right now. I'll talk to Suri and get it set up. No, I do hope, really last thing here as we try to wrap up, I do hope that we see something from this movie soon. And I guess that just became much more unlikely, but you know, just some like official
But
set.
maybe more necessary.
Yeah, that's true too. That is true too. Anything just from like official production stills and set photography and stuff like that, a poster. I don't think I mean, obviously it's not time for a trailer yet, but you know, just that kind of stuff. Like I want something to kind of get me to feel more comfortable with this movie at this point, you know?
Do you think they'll do that, or do you think we might get us like an episode 8 surprise next week too?
That
That'd
would
be like,
be, yeah, no, good point. That would be a really nice, sort of outcome of this whole thing is some more episode 9, you know, something. Just show us some crazy alien or like another, you know, cool photo of Ray doing who knows what. But
hey, it's Poe Dameron.
yeah,
It's your friend,
yeah,
Poe.
yeah,
Remember,
yeah.
you love this guy. You love this franchise.
Hmm.
Everything's cool. This
Maybe like
movie still
maybe like
hitting its release date.
maybe like Finn and Poe sitting at like having like a picnic on Naboo by a waterfall or something, just to like chill everybody out. I don't know.
That would
Um,
definitely put me in a good place.
yeah, I know. For sure. No, but actually, I saw a story today. Supposedly, the second trailer for The Last Jedi has been rated by like the British Film Board or someone like that, and it's 90 seconds long. Is the rumor? I would not expect another trailer this soon. I would expect maybe a behind the scenes reel at Comic-Con or something like that, and then a trailer in the fall. But I don't know. That's the word on the street. So we'll see if that's accurate or not. But I'll take it. I'd be happy for a 90-second episode 8 trailer right now. I would be thrilled to see that.
I'd be happy with that too. And then I don't want anything else, which I think I said last time.
Yeah,
with the teaser, but
yeah, you're gonna get some more stuff, but
yeah,
I don't know when.
It.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up for tonight, Ryan. Thank you very much for joining me at the last minute to talk about this shocking Han Solo news, and obviously we'll get back together to follow this and see where it goes. My fingers are crossed.
Okay. One last thing.
Yeah.
What if the entire conflict was based around Han shooting first, and that's what this all stems from? Because that is that's a divisive issue.
I think you just sealed the deal. It sounds like George Lucas is coming in to finish this movie. Yeah, no, I don't know. That'd be crazy. There's a crew shirt or a crew poster or something that makes some kind of reference to that.
Yeah, like, it was a play on that. I remember.
Yeah, like
it was like a blue shirt
shot
something.
first. Yeah, like yeah.
That's cute.
So yeah, but we'll see. All right, so we'll wrap up there for tonight. As always, you can find more of our podcasts and videos and blog posts and photos and all that good stuff on blockaderunnerpodcast.com. Please subscribe in your podcast app of choice. Subscribe on YouTube, as we're usually recording live there. You can follow the podcast, which is, that account is kind of run by me at Blockade Run on Twitter. And then Ryan, your Twitter handle is
at Brandwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
Cool. And we've got some stuff in the pipeline. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Pretty excited about the next one on the docket.
Yeah, the next one's going to be a lot more fun.
I think so. Yeah, the next one should be fun. Yeah, and So and that was your idea, and I am super looking forward to doing that one. So hopefully sometime in the next week or two, we'll be back with that episode. Don't want to say any more yet. So thanks for listening and or watching, and let's all cross our fingers together that this Han Solo movie is going to be good. All right, see ya.
Bye.